Okay, the recording is going. Welcome, everyone, to our very first Birth Stories Night webinar. We are hoping to present nights like these where people present their birth stories, or maybe their postpartum stories, or maybe their pregnancy stories, maybe their breastfeeding stories. If you have any ideas about a night where you would like to hear people's different stories of their experiences, either through pregnancy or early parenting, we would love to gather those people for you and share a night like this for you. So we're hoping to do these at least bi-monthly. If we can manage it every month, we will. But anyone who's here who's a birth worker knows how that goes. Okay. So welcome. My name is Tanya Wills. I'm here from Manhattan Birth, and that's the capacity in which I'm wearing my hat tonight as a childbirth educator, but I also happen to be a midwife. So hopefully I'll juggle those roles if I need to. Actually, it might be really fun for us to use the raise hand feature. So why don't we just take a little poll to see who's here tonight? Would you raise your hand if your fake hand, you know what I mean, your technical hand, if you are here tonight because you are expecting a baby? Let's see how many people we have that are expecting babies. Everybody's figuring out how to raise their hands. At least, oh, here, now they're coming up. Okay, cool. All right, we definitely have a decent handful of people that are expecting, and I'm seeing some names of people that I know are expecting babies. So they're just not raising their hands. Okay, you can I'm gonna lower your hands. Okay, great. How many people are here that work in birth? Birth workers of any capacity. Okay, good. Lots of birth worker friends are here too. Fantastic. You might be another interested citizen for some reason. I don't know what that would be, but but that's fine. You're into birth stories. That's cool. In any case, I'm gonna lower your hand, Dawn. You can lower your hands now, my birth worker friends. Okay, great. So we have 3 stories for you tonight, and I don't know if Sophia is on yet. I don't.
Hi,
oh, she is. You are here.
Yeah, sorry.
Fantastic. Are you on video?
Yeah, can you see? I can see me and you and Sarah.
We can see ourselves. That's all we care about.
Yay! Oh, just have a beer, Alex. That's fine. Okay,
Sure.
we can do that when we're not renting space. Okay, so let me introduce you guys, and then I'm gonna mute myself so that way the picture will come to you and you guys can hear Sophia and Alex and EJ. Okay, our first story is Sophia, Alex, and EJ. In the interest of full disclosure, everybody that you're going to hear tonight did take a childbirth preparation class with me, which is how I know them. So that's the main thing. And all of the births are great, fantastic stories that are all different. I don't think any of them are what the families expected. So I think that you're going to get a lot out of how they were able to utilize their resources together as a burgeoning family, so they could make it through their very first gigantic challenge, giving birth. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to you. But what I always tell people when they're sharing birth stories is that, we don't need to know exactly what happened at exactly what time. Just speak from the heart, start from the beginning. We're going to give you about 20 minutes to tell your story, and I'll give you a little gentle nudge when you have about 5 minutes left. And what I always say is, you don't need to sugarcoat anything, because we're really interested in hearing exactly what happened. And you also don't need to dramatize anything, because birth stories are really dramatic. So you can just 100% be yourself, and that's really all I have to say. And just one last thing for everybody who's here tonight is thank you. This is really, really great. So I know EJ is totally psyched to be here. He's wearing a really nice hat. And Sophia and Alex and EJ, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Hey guys.
Hello.
So we took a class with Tanya and Sarah in preparation for our home birth. And I think we were the only couple in the class when we first, on that first day when Tanya asked, how many people are planning a home birth, we were the only ones, to our shock and surprise. We thought maybe we should think twice. But
and I was the only one who had ever seen a goat born. So that was just awesome.
So
I really felt special about that.
So we opted for a home birth, not because we ever knew anything about it, but because we had some of our closest friends highly recommend it. And so
can I?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think that's why I opted for a home birth. I opted for a home birth because my wife made a case to me that it was the best chance at having a natural birth. Now, I didn't believe that at first, but I'm a science fellow, and when she showed me a bunch of stuff, I was kind of shocked and amazed, and I suddenly started feeling like the birth that we wanted, which we both knew we wanted to have a natural vaginal birth without meds. That was what we really kind of said to each other, that's what we'd like. And yes, we wanted it to be at home, and we felt like having it at home was actually, given the current medical climate, the best chance of getting that aim. So that was
my only wish for a birth was to be able to move. My biggest fear was not being able to move during labor. And so all of that being said, we planned a really amazing, fabulous, beautiful home birth.
We had moved into this new house,
Yeah.
Which is up close to Bear Mountain Bridge, about an hour north of New York. And it's like, we can't show it to you, but it's like super cool and lovely. And we were like, wow, we're going to have a beautiful birth here. We found a little part of the house, 3 rooms that we were going to move between.
Yeah.
We had friends who had had home births come over and help us plan it out. We had a doula up here. We had the support of Tanya and Sarah. And we also had 2 amazing midwives who have a home birth practice up here in Croton, which is not far away from where we live.
So we were ready, and we had made it all the way to week 40. And the day of that we hit week 40, we had an appointment, a checkup with our midwives. And I'd had a really amazingly easy pregnancy, super easy, didn't vomit once, didn't have just so loved my pregnancy. Everything was great. And there I was, week 40, and my midwife was taking my blood pressure as always. And she looks at me and she goes, wow, your blood pressure's a little high. And I said, oh, I just had a green tea and I'm dehydrated. She was like, all right, well, why don't you come in tomorrow and we'll check it again.
Then she looked at me and she said, hey, don't get worried. And
So-
she didn't say come tomorrow. She said come in a couple days and we'll check it again.
Right. And that night I had a headache.
And then I got nervous when she got a headache. So then I was texting our midwife at midnight, and as Tanya and Sarah will tell you, happens all the time. And I was like, she has a headache. Maybe we should come in sooner. And she agreed. And so we came in on Tuesday.
So I went in the next day, and it turned out that my blood pressure had gone up again. And we very quickly realized that we were in a precipitous situation, and my midwives were concerned that I was showing signs of preeclampsia.
Well, we weren't sure at that point.
It's a 20-minute conversation.
It's a 20-minute conversation, but the onset is very important. Actually, how we utilized our team in the first 2 days is super important, I think, actually.
Okay.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a thing that happened as a result of all this that I'm dealing with right now. So, but anyway, the point is that we actually were holding out as much as possible because we were hoping that it wasn't something that would actually make us need to transfer. And sometimes people have hypertensive pregnancies, latent pregnancy, and they can actually deliver a baby if it's just hypertension. And I was doing tons of research, and we were calling lots of people, including Sarah and Tanya, during the lead up to a decision that we were all going to have to make together. And there's really two symptoms of preeclampsia. One is, well, there's many, but the telltales are a mixture of having high blood pressure and having protein in your urine. And so there was a big conversation between us and our entire care team about whether to wait to take a look and see if there was protein in Sophia's urine, which might indicate that she was preeclamptic, or whether we were going to be able to, we were trying at every turn to avoid a transfer, basically.
Yeah.
And
so
by the third day, by Wednesday,
we ended up in the last possible imaginable situation for us, which was in a hospital.
but we also need to describe how we chose the hospital. It's very important to the story.
Sure. Yeah. When we realized that I needed to be induced, we realized that we had very few options in terms of preserving the kind of birth that we wanted to have. And
let's explain why that is. Sorry, I'm just going to keep making more details. Sophia wants to rush through it. It was Thanksgiving. So we were on the cusp of a major holiday weekend. And one of the problems was it was Wednesday of Thanksgiving, and we all determined, including with Sarah and Tanya's advice, that we should probably transfer that day so as to get into a hospital as soon as possible so that Sophia's preeclampsia wasn't going to advance anymore and we would have even less options in terms of how we wanted the birth to go. And so because it was the hospital, because it was the holiday weekend, our midwives were very concerned about where we might end up because most of the doctors are off on the holidays, especially the midwives you might want. A lot of times you have sort of like the secondary group who are on for the holidays, who have less seniority and all that kind of stuff. So what ended up happening, which was really kind of interesting in terms of like the birth element of the story, or the birth story element of this, was that our midwives kind of sat with us for 2.5 hours and discussed every single possible hospital we might go to. And they texted with people on staff at those hospitals and were able to get a list of everyone who was on call for the next 4 days. So, and this is kind of an interesting story because we had a hospital 8 minutes from us, a beautiful hospital that has tubs in every single room, a really high quality, elegant birthing center. That would have been, if we had to transfer, the obvious place for us to go. However, our midwives were familiar with the doctor on call that weekend and considered him to be quite impatient as a person.
Yeah, and high on intervention. And so my biggest fear was not being able to labor, or just not being given a chance to, have some kind of a semblance of a natural birth. So we decided, instead of heading to that really cushy hospital 8 minutes away from our house, to head to North Central Bronx, which
for a reason we decided.
Which is about an hour away from where we live. But we decided to go there because our midwives knew all of the other midwives at that hospital who would be on call for the next 3 or 4 days. And they trusted them, and they knew that they'd give me a chance to labor and to have the best shot at the kind of birth that I was looking forward to having.
We'd had friends with preeclampsia who literally told us that no one with preeclampsia gets a natural birth, which is, of course, bullshit. Yeah. But the point is, we'd been, people had spouted that kind of stuff to us. So we were really, really intent on trying to build this the best way we could, given the cards we were dealt.
The story that we heard, what we knew about preeclampsia was that you get induced, it's so intense, you then get an epidural. If you're lucky, you don't end up with a C-section, but most likely you'll have a C-section. So those were the stories we'd heard. Now,
and with really preeclamptic people, they just rush them right into surgery.
Yeah, so we had no idea what was going to happen to us, but we knew that with the midwives on staff at North Central, we would at least be able to have a dialogue and be able to just to be able to participate in the decision. And we felt really well equipped to do so, primarily, and I to this day, I'm so grateful to Tanya and Sarah. We had an amazing midwife team. Well, our midwives were amazing, but the education that we got with Tanya and Sarah, and I know they did not pay us to say this.
Yes, they did. I thought they did. Didn't they?
Because of what we knew from that class, I felt super ready to kind of face whatever situation, was dealt to us. When we got to the hospital.
One thing I want to say is we called Tanya and Sarah that night, and then we were just on the cusp of going over there, and we said, do you guys know anything about North Central Bronx? And Tanya said the most interesting thing, which is she said, I don't know it well, but I know one thing. It's one of the highest risk communities in New York and one of the lowest C-section rates, which is a really interesting little fact, right? It's a high-risk community with a low C-section rate, which means, as our midwives have suggested, there's kind of a midwife activism in that hospital that is unique, and so that's what we were sort of gunning for, basically.
So the moment we got there, the doctor that was on call immediately put me on a magnesium.
The OBGYN.
The OBGYN, he put me on a magnesium drip, which basically is a muscle relaxer to lower my blood pressure.
And everyone we talked to said, be careful. As soon as you get on the magnesium sulfate, you won't be able to contract because it will basically relax all of your muscles and your uterus won't want to do the work that it's supposed to do.
And what was kind of serendipitous was that in Tanya's and Sarah's class, we had an assignment for one of the classes, and our assignment was to research inductions. So I felt very, very lucky in that moment to have all of that information in my head so that I could actually discuss with the midwives what kind of induction methods I felt comfortable with. And they wanted to...
Can I say one other thing?
Sure.
And one of the things that we did was we went so far with our midwife team before we got to the hospital, you guys. We were able to research what cervical ripeners each of these hospitals had. So we could actually find out, because they were able to text all the people on staff, we were able to find out that they didn't have Cervidil where we were going. Instead, they had Cytotec.
Yeah.
And we were much more comfortable if we were going to use a chemical intervention on ripening Sophia's cervix. We were going to want to use Cervidil over Cytotec. And we knew when we come to the hospital that if they were going to suggest a cervical ripening procedure, we were going to have to decide whether we were comfortable with that medication.
So we were not comfortable with that medication, and I asked the midwife if she was okay with me trying a Foley balloon, and she was hesitant at first, but I said that was the thing I felt most comfortable with, and she then agreed. It was a real discussion.
It was a negotiation,
and I got the Foley balloon that night. I was able to have my own contractions as a result of that.
For a second, what was sort of strange was that Sophia was actually going into her own labor. We were going in to be induced, but she was already going into her own natural labor that night, which was kind of the strangest thing ever, because we were like entering normal natural labor, but also then going into the hospital and being hooked up to this magnesium sulfate. They decided, because Sophia was having her own contractions, not to start the actual Pitocin until the next morning. So they kind of let Sophia labor through the night with the Foley balloon.
Yeah, and that was awesome. I got a real sense of what my natural contractions felt like. By the morning, I'd had so much magnesium pumped into me that all the contractions stopped. And at that point, at 9 a.m., they started to administer...
They started the Pitocin at 9, and it did nothing. Nothing.
For hours and hours. It did
hours
nothing.
And hours.
And they did this really weird thing, like they kind of do one drop at a time for
one
like
drop per hour, one half a drop per hour,
so
one
like,
drop per hour.
Because it's a really intense drug, and they don't want you to like die, I guess, from the pain. And so they're coming in every hour and adding a little dose, adding a little dose, adding a little dose.
And she's just sleeping.
And I'm like,
and
boring.
The doula and I are just sitting there like, what the fuck is going on? She's sleeping. And it's just like, it was like crazy. And here's the thing, guys, they're not supposed to get to like 16, 20 drops. And we were at 14 and she was just dead asleep.
And then I noticed that my hand was really puffy where they had the IV with the drip of the Pitocin. And I was like, oh shit, you guys, I don't think the Pitocin is going in the vein. And then the nurse comes in and she's like, whoopsie, sorry, the needle collapsed off the vein. So they switch
it to the other lock.
North Central Bucks.
They switch it to the other lock. And what's hilarious about this is that suddenly she goes from, a little bit to 14 drops of Pitocin an hour, like immediately.
And then shit went crazy. But then it was truly the most painful experience of my life. And the thing that I had wished for when I said I want to be pregnant and I want to have a home birth because I want to move around in my space and just be able to have access to like motion and my body, that completely went out the window. I could not move at all, primarily because the magnesium makes you dizzy, and so the hospital doesn't want you leaving the bed. But then the Pitocin was the dose of that Pitocin was so intense that even if I wanted to move and could move, I don't think I could have. It was just completely debilitating.
So one of the things that I should say too, that we're not being clear about, that's I think again super important with this, is there was a progression of midwives all taking over at the end of shifts.
Yeah.
And the good news was we knew in advance the temperament of each one. And there was kind of a way in which actually each one was better than the last. So it was like we started with pretty good, and the person who delivered us was like totally amazing. And it was like shift by shift, each midwife who came in there allowed us to break a couple more rules, was a little more like ready to really help us find the kind of experience we were looking for. And to be clear with you all, Sophia wouldn't have been allowed to do any of this if she hadn't responded immediately to that blood pressure reducer, that magnesium sulfate. I mean,
you guys, this is your gentle nudge.
5 minutes.
So 5 minutes, yeah.
Basically, once that Pitocin was in, it was what, 8 hours of labor?
No.
How long?
What, 6?
6 hours. Okay. So it was 6 hours of the most intense pain of my life. I kept my eyes closed the whole time. And my midwife, Kathy Gallagher, stood by my side and talked me through every contraction. At one point, I did turn around to my doula. I remember saying, I think I need an epidural. And she kind of just ignored me. And I told Alex, I think I need an epidural. And he was like, you're doing a great job. Keep going. So they did the thing that they're supposed to do, which is just say, keep going. You did a great job. And no one ever mentioned the E word again. It was just kind of this like thing that passed over me.
I have a sound recording of transition that Sophia went through. So I have her whole entire transition period, which was about 45 minutes. I still haven't listened to it, but I will listen to it. And I'll let you guys know what that feels like.
It was an incredible experience. It was truly the last thing in the world that I would have imagined for my birth. And it was with, in all honesty, the birth that I would never trade it in for any other birth. It taught me so much about I think everything on the other side of things, now being a mother, and the absolute terror and unexpected nature of all of it. I felt like that birth was the perfect threshold for this experience on the other end.
And we didn't, Sophia did not get pain medication, and we obviously didn't get an operation. So for us, what was kind of weird was that at least for me anyway, what I started out with wanting, we were able to get. The strange thing is, I would also argue the reason we were able to get it, in my belief, is because we had decided to do home birth, which means we were in contact with such amazing birth workers who know this world so well that even when we transferred, they were guarding our vision for what this could be. And that kind of guardianship actually led us to the birth we actually needed.
Yeah.
So what's weird about it is that it's like, without that team, that would not have happened. And the only reason we had that team was because we were gunning for home birth. So it's a strange kind of circular thing.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, like, nothing beats just your own agency, and like the way that we educated ourselves on all of this was what allowed us to just be able to go for whatever was happening and feel like we were a part of the conversation and not feel, I never once felt scared or in the dark about what was going on. I was terrified. I was very sick and it was a very scary experience, but I was able to make decisions every step of the way, very informed decisions. And so it felt like my birth. No matter what was happening, I felt like, yes, this is my birth. This is mine. This is mine. I'm going to do this the way that I want to do this, even if I have no idea how it's going. It's still mine. So that was, it was a beautiful experience. And, you know, I'm a strong advocate of home birth still. But
Absolutely.
Hospital births are cool too, man. They're awesome. Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's an amazing, I think, ending. Tell it. So you pushed him out, right?
I pushed him out and they put him right, like I was able to like grab him and put him right on my chest right away, which was really cool.
I had a leg.
He held one of my legs, not the baby's leg. He wasn't like, come back. But yeah, so, and we had delayed cord clamping and.
Oh, we got it. I mean, this place, this is you guys, maybe you guys don't know about this place, but these guys are like serious activists along the whole spectrum. They are really an enlightened crew, and they're working really hard to sort of open up powerful, positive birth experiences for the lowest income, highest risk communities in New York. So, I mean, it is a kind of incredible thing that we accidentally landed in, you know, so.
Yeah, midwives are incredible. The midwife that caught my baby, I never saw her. I mean, I saw her after the baby was born, but when she showed up, my eyes were closed because my contractions were so intense. And I just remember she leaned over and kissed me and said, "Hi, I'm going to deliver your baby." And I was like, all right. And I didn't say anything, actually.
She took you through two.
She took me through two contractions. Sarah and Tanya, I remembered something. I said at one point, when I was in transition, I did say, "You guys, I gotta go."
She did. And everybody laughed. And the whole room filled with people taking it all so seriously, just laughed their asses off.
I mean, I was like screaming bloody murder. I was dying. And then finally I was like, "You guys, I gotta
go." And it was very casual.
That's one of our jokes that we tell people in class, is that sometimes when people are in transition, they say, "That's it, I'm leaving. I'm out of here." And we're like, "Where are you going?"
I really thought I could. There was a part of me that was like, I think I'm just gonna go to Starbucks.
The one last thing I just want to say is that given all of that, it was awesome. Then we headed down to pediatrics, and then we were stuck in the North Central Bronx Hospital for 3 days. And that's
I
just want to say, we're not going to tell that story, but it's like, you choose, there are sacrifices for the things that you are looking for. And so everything comes with a price tag. Yeah. And there was certainly a price tag on the end of this.
Thank you for that, the card turning game. I thought that was just an exercise. That is not an exercise. No. That is for real.
Yeah, that was for real.
They're talking about a game that we play in class where basically you get to lay out your perfect dream birth, and it's on a set of cards, and then you have to make choices about which things you're willing to trade away. And some of them might be, one of the cards is, home birth, and then the other side of the card is hospital birth, right? Or one of them might be, I want to have my doctor, and the other one is I get a backup doctor, or, I have my doula or my backup doula or whatever. And so they make different choices in that game, and a lot of people don't like doing it, and they yell at us and think we're mean and stuff for making them give away all their dreams. But it is a great exercise in helping people make decisions together and identifying what is important. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. There's going to be time for questions at the end. If you can stick around, that would be amazing. If there's anybody who has just a little, I just want to give you a little tidbit in case you don't know, but Sophia was talking about preeclampsia, which is a complication in pregnancy that happens sometimes, that is a medical complication that kind of nobody sees coming until it's there. So there's no way she could have predicted anywhere in her prenatal care that this is going to happen. It's not her fault. It's not anything she did. And that's why we have doctors and midwives that check our blood blood pressure every week, and if you pee in a cup, or, you know, these kinds of things at the end of your pregnancy when you're being checked, you're basically being screened for things like this. So that's one of the things that, surprise, surprise, came up for these guys, and they aced it right over their Thanksgiving turkey. So I'm going to mute you, Sophia. We'll come back if there's questions. But I think what we're going to do now is move over to Gretchen and Doro, who I will unmute. Where are you, Gretchen? There you are. I'm unmuting you. Okay, now I can hear you. Say hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so I'll give you a little intro. So you guys look great on camera. It's a nice tone of paint behind you. So this is Gretchen and Doro and Cedar, who is totally into this. How old is Cedar?
It's 10 weeks.
Yeah.
10 weeks. So he's a big guy. Hi, Cedar. Nice to see you. Hi. So anyway, you heard the spiel. So we're going to start in just a minute. I'm going to give you like the little 5-minute nudge at around 15 minutes. Okay. But they have a great story to tell. So I'm going to mute myself. And if anyone during this, if you guys have any questions that you think of that you don't want to interrupt, you can always just message me privately in the chat. Okay. Or you can raise your hand and we'll get back to you. Okay. Okay, Gretchen, off you go.
All right. Well, it's really interesting to go after Sophia and Alex because we came into the same class as them with you thinking we would have a birth center birth and a hospital, but sort of I was longing or still wishing for a home birth. And then we ended up switching to home birth. And also we're like terrified that I had preeclampsia. Tanya ended up being our midwife and we were like constantly checking that. And then I never ended up having it. So it's sort of interesting. It's like what you're afraid of ends up ending up being the opposite. So where did we start? So we started class with Tanya.
Right.
And that was the one thing I was clear about. We started meeting with Tanya for our first interview, and we ended up interviewing a lot of both home birth midwives and looking at birthing centers because we both knew we wanted a natural birth. Mm-hmm. But I kind of frustratingly felt both scared of having a home birth and scared of being in the birth center, and so didn't have like this clear, I know I want a home birth or I know I want to be at a birth center. I had anxiety about both. Yeah. And so because New York has such a plethora of options, we went around looking at lots of different folks. And then we ended up sort of without making a choice, staying with a practice that delivers at Mount Sinai West. But I knew I wanted to take Tanya's class. And so we were in class with Alex and Sophia. Mm-hmm. And the more that we started learning in class about kind of the various things that was just mentioned, that like small medical moments that end up kind of interfering with birth, the more we realized we probably would likely have a birth we didn't want in a hospital, and then we wouldn't have the birth we want otherwise. Right. I feel like I want you to talk a little because I'm like.
So then, every Sunday we asked Tanya, "Can you still be our midwife if we want to switch?" And every Sunday you said, "Sure, let's talk." So at 34 weeks, I think 32 weeks. I don't know. We decided to switch, and that was an awesome decision. And then everything, your pregnancy was pretty easy.
Yeah, I had a very
except
easy
at the
pregnancy.
end you had a lot of heartburn and like headaches and stuff. But then you went in when? After your due date, after 40 weeks, like 5 days after her due date, she went into labor. And like it started out all perfectly. We woke up at 6 a.m. on Wednesday, and you were like, "I think these are contractions. They don't feel anything like I thought they would."
Yes.
But they happen every 10 minutes or so, and I'm pretty sure it's early labor. So we were excited. And then we learned in class, we're like, okay, we're going to do all the things. We're going to go eat a big meal. And Gretchen had an acupuncture appointment. She was like, okay, I'm going to go do that. And
yeah, it was really exciting. I think at that point it was sort of still glamorous. I think I bought like earrings at a boutique, and I was like, I'm a goddess in labor, and it's gonna be beautiful. And we had the birth plan, and I'd blown up all these photos of like my vision board for the birth. Like I think at that point still had this idea we were gonna have a beautiful, easy birth. And I think also started texting people thinking we'll probably give birth that day or probably the next day. I think I thought we would labor through the night and then I would give birth in the morning.
yeah.
Which my sister was excited about because it was her birthday as well. But that's not what ended up happening. We ended up, I think we went through the night. You were pushing up. My contractions were always worse in the evening.
Yeah, like the first day, like around 4 p.m. or something, got really bad. So we were like, is this like active labor now? We're like, I guess we're done with early labor.
Right.
So I think we called you or something, and you were like, do you have a contraction right now? And Gretchen was like, yeah. And you're like, well.
Well, I think that's the hard part, is that it like hurts. I don't know that I understood the level of what the pain would be, because I think Tanya would, like, I would be talking and Tanya would say like, oh, was that the contraction just there? And I still talk, but I was like, but it really, really did hurt. Like, I'm not making it up. And so it's just at that point, you don't know how much it's like really gonna hurt. Like I feel like I just kept on getting my ideas of what the birth would be like, kept kind of like shattering sort of slowly. So we labored through that evening, and we had a doula, and I think we let her know we were in labor, but we didn't have her come. Mm-hmm. And then we labored through the next day, but never got into a rhythm enough. I think I felt like we were on the app a lot, and I kept on being like, when do we get, like, what is it supposed to be? 3 minutes apart, 1 minute long? Like, I was trying to figure out the math of like, why aren't we getting there? But we weren't getting there. And so we labored.
It was really hard. And like Gretchen's back hurt really bad. So every contractions I had to like press on her lower back. Mm-hmm. And that's I think why on Thursday night then I was so exhausted. We hadn't slept. It was exhausting. And then so we called the doula and we were like, I'm exhausted. Can you please come? Right?
And so she came and relieved you.
That was awesome.
And Dora took a 5-hour nap?
Yeah, I think she came at like 11 at night, and she was like, okay, what are you guys doing? What's going on? And she's like, okay, I can handle this. She's like, go in a room, close the door, and take a nap. And I was like, yes.
And she basically took over Dora's role, which was strange. I mean, that's a weird experience. Like, it's very intimate. It's like, it's never ever in your life to feel like you have people be that intimate, that close, like that you haven't been intimate with before. So she like got in bed with me as if we were like, and we like went to bed and like labored together. And our dog was here. So it was like sweet and also really weird. Yes. And I think I was like also frustrated with like, I was like, Doro gets to go sleep. That's not fair. And then we woke up in the morning. You were refreshed, so that was helpful.
Yeah, I slept for like 4 or 5 hours, which is awesome. And I woke up and Gretchen was still doing exactly the same thing.
And I think at this point I had gotten into like patterns of how I would labor. I mean, this is where I, thank God for hormones, don't know where the story, like which parts are when did I pee on my couch and throw up at the same time? Like when did I start laboring on the toilet, or was I doing that thing I did for this thing on this couch, the couch I'm on right now, where I would just like push up like this, and my doula would say, you know, you're like stopping the contraction from being effective. And I was like, yes, but it makes it feel better. So there started to be this tension between like, how do we get me to like labor more effectively? And then I didn't want to do that because it was more painful. And so it really became like a mind. I think what I wasn't prepared for is I was so scared of the physicality of it, but it really is a mind game. Like it's like a game with your mind. Like how do you get yourself to like walk towards stuff that feels bad? And I feel like we did, like, do you know the sequence after that of like, when did we walk around the block?
I think we kept that was still Thursday. We walked around the block. I know Tanya came on Friday morning to check things out, but I don't know if we had I don't think we had a pool set up then.
I mean, I just remember like flashes then. Sorry, Jorah's gonna take a break because he's crying. I just remember these flashes of like we take a walk and then I like stop to labor like do a contraction on a fire hydrant, and like a man comes out of his apartment building. He's like, "Oh yeah, it was cold last night. Like my limbs are hurting too." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like I'm laboring right now." And then we would like come back in, and I think it just felt like hard, but like a stasis, like a just kind of like going on, and it was like day, and then it was night, and then it was day, and then it was night. And really that happened, the labor started Wednesday morning, and that happened until Friday night, like really. I think, Tanya, you came Friday morning and for a little bit and checked me. Yes. And thank God did not tell me I was only 1 centimeter dilated or something after 2.5 days of labor. And gave me, and that's when they started giving homeopathic stuff and Chinese herbs. I don't remember if that happened then. And I think we'd saved the pool to like,
maybe
for hope or something, like for like something left to do. And that's when maybe the pool, I think towards that evening, maybe when you guys blew up the pool. Am I missing anything?
Well, when Tanya, then the doula and Tanya left Friday afternoon. And they were like, we're both going home for a little while. See you later. And then as soon as they left, it got your contractions got way stronger and closer together. And like, I think we texted the doula after half an hour, like, it's really bad. You got to come back. And she's like, I'm going to go take a shower.
Right. Yes. Right. She like got home, got to like eat and then came back. Well, I think, they were both excited something was happening. And so the doula came back. I think at that point, the pool was such a relief because it felt like some sort of movement forward after just this like kind of haze of being like in and out of days and like in this kind of funny state of mind and in pain. And so I got in the pool. I really loved the pool. I don't remember. I mean, again, all of it, everything that I had thought it would be these clear stages where each stage would then like result in like clear movement towards the baby coming out. And I think even with the pool, like I think I spent hours and hours in this pool. Like I don't know how many hours I spent in the pool. Yeah, and so it would just feel like relief to get there, and then it would still be going on. It just kept going on. And at that point, gosh, Tanya came. At some point, you tried to like, I had a lip of, so he was, part of the issue, it was sort of like how Cedar was turned in me. So he was like sunny side up, and then there was like a cervical lip over him. And so I do have a memory, and I don't know when this happened, of like bracing myself against the pool and like Tanya trying to pull my cervical lip off while like I pushed, but I know that it didn't work. I was very excited for that to work because I think in my mind it was like, and then he would come out. And so I don't remember. All I can say is that I wish I'd saved myself the trouble because I've compared notes with other women that I feel like had this moment before their whole labor started, and so they had a shorter labor. But basically, sort of my giving up point, they wanted me to lie down in bed and face the wall, and I'm claustrophobic and not move and let the contraction move the baby. And it was this sort of fighting that whole thing. And I went in to do it again for like the, 12th time or something. And then I came back out, and I think that is when I had my giving up moment. Tanya and the doula were like curled up trying to sleep on my couch, and I was just like, okay, like that's it, let's go to the hospital, I'm ready to have my C-section or something, like get me out of here. And I think Tanya was like, listen, I just got here, we can do that, but why don't you prove to me you can't have this baby? And then said something else, which Tanya, I really don't remember what you said. In my mind you said something like, why don't you just be a big girl about it or something? I don't think you said that. But I know you didn't say that. I prefaced the story with that. But in my mind, that's how I heard it. And I feel like that this is the moment of birth that was like, and I agree with Sophia that like the whole process prepared me for like how hard it is to be a parent. But there was something where I had like shifted from being a victim of the labor. Like I think I'm like have this, I almost feel like it would have been better for me to be alone in the woods for this whole labor. Like if I had to like be on my own, that part of me would have come out that would have been like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to do this. But because people were watching me, I was sort of like, look what's happening to me. I'm hurting, like make it go away. And then we like had these people that were supposed to help me make it go away or paid to make it better. Like literally that's what a doula is. And so then I'm like push on my back and like sort of a queen about it. And so in that moment when Tanya didn't say be a big girl about it, but whatever, in my mind she did, I was sort of like, all right, fine. Like if I have to have the baby, all right, Dora, like don't touch me when I make contractions, just help me count to 15. And then the pain's supposed to go away, which by the way, I now like feel clear was just a mind trick because it didn't go away because I wasn't having clean breaks at that point. And then I was like, I'll just do it myself. And so I like went in and like laid in the position that they told me to do. And I like breathed through the pain and was like, but like in charge instead of like in victim mode. And like in my mind, I had 3 contractions like that and then my water broke and I started to push. And then it was like thrilling. But at that point, I think I shifted outside my body to some degree where it's like anything that would exciting would happen. I would be like, don't bank on it. Like, don't think this is going to be it. Like, don't believe that it can happen. Even when they were like literally setting up like the pads on the bed for the baby to come out, I was like, don't believe it till it's true. Like, don't count on this. But so that was exciting to just have something. And I think you guys like were like, yay. They were both like cheered or something. Do you want me to hold on? Do you want to like share more, or do you want me to keep going? You love me sharing this stuff.
I do.
Okay. So, oh, well, you didn't want to come out. So, so that was really exciting, but then also continued to be like a very long, many hours of like pushing and pushing and pushing on the toilet and pushing in the pool and pushing on the wall. And I think the thing I didn't know is that your stomach just like, it's literally like the Alien movie where like your stomach just pushes itself. I thought I would be pushing. Oh, I thought it would be pushing, but literally your stomach is just like it's weird. And then I got back in the pool and he was doing fine the whole time, which is exciting, except I couldn't lay in the pool because his heartbeat went down when I did that. So that was the one thing we couldn't do. I'm gonna try and feed him.
Okay.
What else?
But then I don't know.
You share something now.
Well, this
I'm talking exciting time.
I don't really remember how you got them to the bed. But anyway, I think I was right. I was busy.
I don't know how I got to the bed.
Okay. We don't know. But we ended up having a baby on the bed and not in the pool. We don't know why.
You're just cutting right to that. And then we had the baby. No, and then. But
I was also busy with we had the dog here, which was
we have a small apartment. It was.
We thought we were like, oh, maybe like when we go into labor, then like we call some friends or we'll bring him to doggy daycare but then the labor just kept going on and going on and going on, and then by the time it was like serious, so it was like midnight. And it was like nobody, like we couldn't put the dog anywhere. So then the doctor stayed. So I was like,
Dora, this is your gentle nudge, just so you know.
Okay. Anyway, so that was hard. I recommend don't have your dog at home. And
also he ate Tanya's like supplies.
Yes.
So here, take mine. Sorry. So I was at hands and knees on the bed. It was very exciting. And this is my favorite part of the birth. And like really all that matters to me in the end, which was like really, really hard. And then the end where you get to feel like I felt like a celebrity / rock star. In my mind, people were like multiple, like Tanya was even like taking photos while I was pushing because I was like doing so great at it. She wanted to document it. Really, literally, it was only the doula taking pictures for us. But in my mind, they were all like, yeah, because I was doing a really good job, which felt so good because I think I felt like I didn't do a good job or like failed every other part of labor because it took me so long. But the pushing felt really, really good. And I was good at it or whatever.
That's right. That's what Tanya said.
And so it only was maybe 45 minutes or an hour of pushing, I think.
40 minutes.
And so he was pushing, like they literally had to tell Dora to come in from the other room because she was like dealing with the dog, and they're like, he's coming. And then everything after that is just like a party, like just like a really nice party at home, where it's like, then you have a baby and he was attached to the umbilical cord, and Tanya passed him through my legs to me, and I'm holding him. Although we did have to, there was another, basically I would have probably had all the medical interventions, which is just why we were so thankful we ended up switching to home birth, including maybe even having my placenta taken out medically, because it took 45 minutes to 50 minutes to come out. Although I do feel like when Tanya was like, we might have to transfer the hospital, I was like, oh, I can push a lot. I'm like, here it goes.
Because you do like,
I don't remember how to do it. But I mean, really, it wasn't coming out the way some women, I think it's easy for them. But it was so lovely to be at home, and like our doula made us smoothies, and everyone, it felt like, and then there was this, I mean, I think it's similar to what Alex was just sharing about like starting to be in this class, which is what helped us realize that being in a home birth is like a really good idea, unless there's like a serious concern not to. Although I think once I realized, like literally, I think Tanya spent an hour, that conversation where I was switching from hospital to home, where she like walked me through all right, if this is going wrong, then we'll go here, because like if it's an issue with the baby, we'll go to NYU because the NICU is the best. And if it's an issue with like just you're taking a long time, we'll drive to Jersey where you get to have like this bath and they treat you really awesome. Like the idea of like, oh, actually I get to choose, if I have to transfer to the hospital, I can transfer to a hospital that's going to be the best for the type of birth I'm having. That's even better than just picking a hospital and you're stuck with whatever they've got and you don't know what it's going to be. And so I think that felt safe. And then also when I finally like realized by finding Tanya and having a provider I trusted, and I didn't have to be the expert that knew what to do. I felt like I found one I could trust. And then she would tell me when we had to go to the hospital. There was something like, I had this whole backstory of like why it was scary for me to choose hospital versus home. And then the idea of like giving that over was another big lesson, I feel like, in preparing for birth. Yeah. But yeah, and then we actually had a number of like post-birth, I had trouble when my milk came in with him latching. Then he had a tongue-tied Tanya diagnosis that no other medical, like no pediatrician saw. Like just things where I was like, this wouldn't have been caught. You know, we wouldn't have been able to know where to go in terms of a specialist. Like when I had trouble latching, like no one would come check on me. I don't know, that like the doula and Tanya and people checking in on us that first week where I felt like that was really, really hard, was also just this like protection and this sort of this extra thing that I feel like I was like, oh, even if we'd gone to this awesome birthing center with these midwives, like they're not coming to our house. They're not coming to like be like, oh, look, he is okay. They're not coming into this space where like all of a sudden we're like, what the fuck is our new life? And people are really checking in on us. Yeah. And so it does feel like this sort of, we got access to this magical, I don't know, woman magic or something of midwifery that exists in this city. That's sort of like, I don't know, when people tell me they're doing anything else, I'm like, okay, but like, I can't imagine. Am I missing anything?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't remember it being a party afterwards.
Really? Because then the doula made us like smoothies. We couldn't make a smoothie with my placenta, which was sad because there was poop everywhere, all over the placenta. He was covered in poop. But like she came in and we like took pictures of, I don't know, in my mind it was a party. I was also awesome. High on like oxytocin, so
I called the paparazzi for you. They weren't available. There's a celebrity who's pushing out her baby in an amazing way. You need help.
Yeah, I remember the party. I remember him crying and we're like, Tanya, he's crying, and you're like, yep. Figure it out. We're like, what?
Yeah.
And look at him now, he's so big. He was like participating in the birth story for a lot of it.
I know.
He was even talking.
I can't believe him. What's up, Cedar? You're into this. Yeah. And you sort of disengaged for a minute, but we ignored you. Engage with us. Engage with us.
Tell a story.
Yeah. I did not tell you to grow up, but I think I probably said, could you at least try before we give up?
Yes.
I really did just get there. And then you were like, okay, I'm done. And I was like, I've been here 45 minutes. So, well, thanks you guys. Sophia, not Sophia that just spoke, but a different Sophia that's on the call had a question during your talk, and her question, I texted it to her, but she said, is it common for first timers to have days and days of early labor?
Well, we learned in a class that the average labor is 5 to 60 hours. And if we count it from when I thought I was in labor, it's 72 hours. But I always tell everyone, I feel like I only looks like I have a long labor because so many people have hospital births. And there's no way I would have been able to labor that long from what I know, if we'd gone to the hospital.
And you wouldn't have been in the hospital the whole time either. Exactly. So if we think about, your doula came, so you started contractions Wednesday night, but your doula came Thursday night.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I came Friday morning and the baby was born Friday night. So it was really Friday evening, like 4:00 in the afternoon is when it really started to pick up. But I will say Gretchen's contractions, even though it hadn't really, really kicked in, they were annoying enough and had exhausted Gretchen and Doro enough that they went ahead and called their doula for help. So in case you're here wondering how a doula might be helpful to you, definitely in the case of a long labor, they really breathe some fresh air and helpful rested hands. And your doula particularly is like supersonic with her energy. So she just kind of kept going.
Yes. Oh, Dora was just reminding me that I was telling the story to a family friend, and I'd said something like, "Oh, I would totally do it all over again, like the whole thing, including the 3 days." So
it's true. Yeah, it wasn't like traumatizing.
No, none of it was traumatizing.
It was just
including one of my memories is when we were doing some position that hurt in the pool. I think you, Tanya, said you're like, it's because there's progress, it's not suffering, or it's not something. It's not suffering, it's like making it work better or something. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's like pain, but it's not suffering.
It's pain, but not suffering.
It's working. Yeah, it was working. Definitely. You made good when I showed up there, you made good progress, but it's not really, you did it. I was sleeping on the couch. Well, thank you, you guys. And there's probably going to be more questions at the end. So if anybody, let me just see if anybody has a raised hand. I don't see any raised hands. Okay. So we will, we'll come back to you. But thank you. And I think for now, we're going to move on to our third story, which is also a long labor.
Oh my God.
You might as well get a lot of bang for your buck, right? So I'm going to mute Gretchen, but we'll just stick around because if we have questions, they'll come up in a few, but thanks you guys. Okay, so our last story for tonight, last but not least, I should give you guys a couple of hours to tell your story, but you're going to squeeze it in to 20 minutes. So this is Ashley and John, and they will tell some sort of truncated version of this.
So I'd like to say that there's like the 90-minute version, and then there's like this 20-minute version. So we'll give you guys the 20-minute version. There is a 90-minute version. Tanya can put you in touch with me or John if you guys have questions after the call. So there are a lot of similar themes to kind of our labor, my labor, and what we heard earlier tonight. I'll just say by way of background, I'm a medical student. I'm a Columbia medical student. And so I actually came to Tanya's class. I wasn't even gonna take a class because I was like, oh, I've already done my OB rotation. I've seen a ton of births. Well, I'd only seen hospital births, and probably like 60 or 70% were C-sections, and all of them were medicated except for one awesome natural labor in the hospital where this woman who'd had 3 babies before got to the hospital too late to get her epidural. And her baby was like hanging out between her legs in like triage. And she was like, I need an epidural. They're like, no, you got to push out the baby. She's like, no, I'm here for the epidural. So But we ended up taking Tanya's class. We had already hired her. See, I don't even remember. I don't remember how this worked. But I had decided that I wanted to try to have a natural labor, an unmedicated labor in the hospital. And then kind of through a series of like thinking together, we realized that that was a smaller chance at the particular hospital where I was planning to give birth. It was like a very small chance. And so then we didn't know how I was going to have an unmedicated hospital birth, but we thought we'd hire a doula. So we like looked into that, and we looked into childbirth centers, and we eventually came across Tanya, who had like raving reviews in the community, and we're like, okay, that's cool. I don't know about this home birth thing, but after a while we kind of got sold on it. And I was like, well, I'm a medical student. Like, I'll know scary signs if I see them. So I'll also know if I need to transfer. So I feel okay with home birthing. So we decided to hire Tanya, and then we took her class. Okay, so fast forward, I'm a happy, healthy, pregnant, 40 and a half weeks pregnant. And Tanya came over and checked me, and she's like, oh, okay, you're 40 and a half weeks. Just do an ultrasound next week if you can at like 41 weeks. So I scheduled that. They like didn't have space until 41 and a half weeks. And I'm like, this is going on for a while, but you know, I was like, no problem. And meanwhile, I'll schedule some acupuncture. So I got set up with some acupuncture. And on Sunday night, I had my first acupuncture session, and we went out to a very fancy dinner. And finishing our delicious entrees, I like got up and went to the bathroom, and I went to pee. And then, because I have to pee all the time because I'm almost 41 weeks pregnant. And on the toilet, I had this crazy sensation that I had never had before. And it kind of did feel like a really weird period cramp, but also kind of not. And it hurt, and then it stopped. And I was like, what was that? And I came back to the table, and I was like, I think I had my first contraction. And it was like very much like Gretchen, like, oh, I'm going to be this beautiful laboring goddess. And like, this is the beginning. And like, look at this. This is so amazing. And so we were pretty excited. So the next day was Monday. Tanya came over, and I told her that I had like a contraction last night. She was like, okay. Well, let me just check. I'll just check your cervix. So she checked me, and she said, like, you are 1 centimeter. And I was like, yay, I'm 1 centimeter. This is so exciting. I'm going to have my baby this week. And, Tanya left, and like we kind of went about our day. And then that evening I like started to have more of these like little contractions, and so they would like come. They were not regular. This is early labor. They'd be every 20 minutes apart. Then like one would come every 12 minutes apart. Then one would come like 3 minutes after one. Then I'd be like, and then it'd be like half an hour. So wonky, whatever. All night. And then the sun came up, and it was Tuesday. And I, of course, texted like a couple family members who were like, your baby's going to be born tomorrow. And so kind of had this like weird little, like, it was like hors d'oeuvres. It wasn't even an appetizer. It was like hors d'oeuvre labor. The sun came up in the morning, and everything stopped. And I was like, okay, well, that's fine. Like, it's going to happen. We made, another appointment for acupuncture on Wednesday. Tuesday, the sun was set, and Tuesday night, like labor started again. And Tuesday night, John sat up with me on the couch, and we kind of like labored together, and we were like doing all the moves to practice in class, and it was painful, but John was with me 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, my irregular labor. And then Wednesday morning, the sun came up, and my labor stopped again. Wednesday, I went and had another acupuncture session because we've been in touch with Tanya and the doula, and we're kind of like, okay, let's get things going. So I had another acupuncture session, and again, Wednesday, the sun sets, and as the sun sets, labor starts again, and John and I are again kind of like alone, but like now it's not so glamorous, and it's not so cute, and we're not like lovey-dovey about it, because it's like this is like the third night of this weird like on again off again labor that doesn't have a rhythm that I can't get into. I'm like looking up at, I had made just like Gretchen like all these like birth affirmations and like hung them all over the apartment, like open, like I will breathe into this and like all this stuff, because I had done all this research about how I was going to have this like empowered, unmedicated home birth. And so I'm like looking around at my posters, like trying to breathe. And so Thursday morning, the sun rises, and at this point, you can jump in at any point if I'm like leaving stuff out. I'm trying to be like,
yeah, good job.
Okay. Thursday, Tanya comes over and she's like, okay, let's start to do some things. Why don't you have the castor oil, why don't you try that? Or like, you know, I have some herbs for you. And so Thursday, I took castor oil and some herbs and I puked it all up. And then I started having like massive amounts of diarrhea because of like the little trace amount of castor oil that like did make it through my system. And so then I changed into adult diapers. And so I'm like wandering around my house, like very pregnant, like with diarrhea in adult diapers, like having irregular contractions. And at that point, the doula came because John and I were like, we can't do another night alone. Like we need reinforcements, kind of like Gretchen Durrell. Like we need extra help. So doula came and Tanya came and everybody was like, okay. And then at some point, also I had this, so not only was my labor would start when the sun would go down and then stop at sunrise, but also everything that I was kind of taught to do to like augment labor would stop labor. So people were like, do stairs or go for a walk. So I would like I live on a 4th floor walk. So we'd like do stairs or I'd like go for a walk and labor would just stop. And then I'd be like, you know what? I'm just going to lie down and just try to get like half an hour of rest. So I'd go to crawl into bed and like curl onto my side and like try to rest. And like labor would like start right back up again. So it was this like impossible, like I can't get any rest and labor won't actually be regular. And so I was feeling very frustrated about it. Finally on Thursday, my water broke and I got up at one point and I was like, there's something wet dripping down my legs. Am I peeing? Tell me I'm not peeing. Tell me I'm not peeing. And so they check and it's clear and it's so exciting. There's no meconium in it. And then everybody's mood like rose and we were like, oh, this could be it. It could be tonight. We filled up the birth pool, like we inflated it. And then everybody decided that everybody needed rest because the end was coming.
Well, right when your water broke, you were having pretty regular contractions.
It was at that point.
And then the water broke and everyone said, yay, and then everything stopped.
Then
again.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. My water broke and then my body was like stop. Dead stop. And it stopped. And at that point, Tanya checked me and I think it was like, so you were at like +1 station. And now you're at 0. And I was like, he went back up? What do you mean? Is he coming out of my nose? Like, where is he going? What is happening? And my beloved son, who had been in a really fabulous position where his head was facing my back the entire time that I was in Tanya's care, weeks and weeks and weeks, Tanya now says, he's facing up. He's sunny side up. Like, and I was like, that, how could that have happened? What is happening? No. And so it was kind of like, okay, well, what can we do? So then everybody went to get some rest because it was just too much. So then it's Friday morning and my wonderful acupuncturist, who Tanya put us in touch with, felt so bad for me that I was like entering my 5th day of labor at home, that she came to the house and she like came and did like, she paid me a visit at home and she said, how are you doing? And I said to her, I am a lost soul. I was like, I feel like I've seen so many births and I've researched so much of birth and I had read probably more than 1,000 birth stories at that point. Cause I was like, I'm a medical student, so I'm trained to learn all the things. So I had just like read every birth story that's published on the internet, every podcast with a birth story I had listened to. And I was like, it feels like I'm I'm a traveler who's landed in a strange, strange country. I don't speak the language. I can't read any of the signs. I don't know where I am. I can't get people to tell me where the bathroom is or how to like get a glass of water. Like, I'm so confused right now. I'm so confused. And she says, okay, I'm going to do some work on you. And then I'm going to give you a vision. I want you to imagine a bright, clear, sunny day. The sky is blue, the air is crisp, and you're standing on a riverbank. And you're looking out across the river, and on the other side of the river, there is your baby. You're going to meet your baby. There's a bridge that's connecting you and your baby. And I need you to ask, how are the two of you going to meet? Is your baby going to cross the bridge to you? Do you need to go across the bridge and get your baby? Are you guys going to meet in the middle? What's going to happen? So she gives me this vision. She like gives me some like TENS, which is like kind of like zingy acupuncture. And then I go into this vision and I swear on everything that I saw this little being on the other side of the riverbank. And I said, little baby, are you going to cross the bridge and come to me? And it was silent. And then I said, do I need to cross the bridge and come to you? And it was just like, yes, yes, you do. So then I fell asleep and everybody took a nap. And then at Friday around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, Tanya came back over and she was like, how are you doing? At this point, we had tried castor oil, we had tried herbs, we had tried homeopathy, we had done physicians, we had walked, we had not walked. We had done rounds and rounds of acupuncture. And I said, I'm ready to transfer. And Tanya said, that is okay. And so we transferred to a fabulous hospital, ironically over a bridge in New Jersey. We packed up, we went to New Jersey. We had this great reception where it was all kind of networked for us. There were receiving midwives. They welcomed us. They set us up in this jazzy room with like a sweet birthing tub. They were still like planning on us having like as close to a birth as I had imagined. And we just didn't know how far from that imagining everything is going to go. So I was ready for my epidural, and I should say I'm going to become an anesthesiologist. So I was very interested in who was going to give me my epidural and how this was all going. And this man placed the most beautiful epidural and my legs went fabulously to sleep. And probably like the highlight of my week, that point, was getting the epidural. I was so elated. Everything melted away and I like floated off into this blissful sleep. They started some Pitocin and they said, we'll check you in the morning. At this point, I was like 4 or 5 centimeters dilated. They're like, we'll check you in the morning, like probably Saturday morning, your baby's going to be here. So I sleep through the night. I'm on huge amounts of Pitocin. I have an epidural, so I can't feel a thing. In the morning, I wake up and I'm shaking, and I had seen enough of this that I knew that like, oh, that's a great sign. Although I can't feel it, my sense is that I'm close to fully dilated. So I called the nurse and I said, I think I'm close to dilated. I can't feel a thing, but I'm like shaky all over. And so she checks me, the midwife comes and checks me, and she's like, okay, you're like 8 or 9 centimeters. And I'm like, but I feel like I need to push. And I'm truncating this a little bit, but basically she's like, okay, do you want to push or not? I was like, yeah, it feels like I got to push. So I gave one push and baby did not like it. His heart rate went like, choo! And the nurses and everybody remained super calm. They're like, okay, we're just gonna, do you mind? I'm gonna put this mask of oxygen on your face. Can you just take a deep breath for me? And I had been in enough rooms where pregnant women were like very gently offered oxygen that I knew that things were not good. And so basically what had happened was he was still stuck. There was a little, like Gretchen, there was like a cervical lip around him, and I wasn't totally fully dilated. I was like 9 centimeters dilated. And he wasn't really low in my pelvis yet. He was still kind of high up. I mean, they could feel his head and they could feel his hair, but he was still kind of stuck and high up and not fully dilated. And the fact that I gave one push, not fully dilated, and his heart rate was not having it, they knew at this point that I was going to probably have a very long pushing phase because he was like so because he was like sunny side up. And so he was like not optimally positioned to come out quickly. And so everybody kind of took a moment, and the hospital midwife turned to me and she said, so you've been on Pitocin for 18 hours and you had labored at home for like 5 days. I feel like if you were going to have a vaginal birth, he would be here by now. She's like, I think we should start to think about a C-section. And so John and I looked at each other and we asked everyone to just give us some time in the room. And so everybody left and we just looked at each other and we just started crying. We were just cried. But not out of like, oh God, everything's fucked. Like this is the worst thing ever. It was more like, oh, so it's come to this. This is the end of this story. And in some ways, I actually felt relieved because I was like, we're really almost there. We're half an hour away from a baby. Tanya came back in and she said some like really calming words to us. And John, like, bless his heart, was like, he said to me, like, I really tried to get you the birth that you wanted. And I'm sorry, I couldn't get that for you. And I was like, it's okay. And later, after everything happened, I like looked back and I was like, I didn't want a hospital birth because I wanted to try to have an unmedicated labor and because I wanted to reduce my risk of cesarean, but I'm not anti-cesarean. And I felt really strongly that like, if I had a C-section, I wanted to know that I had done everything possible to prevent it. And at this point, we really felt like we had exhausted all of the options. And this is it. This is the one thing that was going to like kind of get us our baby. So they wheeled us into the OR and he was delivered. We had a gentle cesarean, and that was another bonus for the hospital that we had transferred to. It not only had hospital midwives, but it had a gentle cesarean. So there was a clear drape and a blue drape. And the blue drape was lowered so I could watch my son being born, and they delayed the cord clamping and John got to cut the cord, and both John and my sister, who I left out of the story, but my sister was like kind of with me as a wing person throughout all of this. So my sister videotaped everything and John was there. And it really felt like a beautiful celebration. And so he was born. What else? How would you end the story?
Well, he was enormous.
Oh, that's right. I knew, right. Okay. So then the question is, why did he get stuck? Why was he stuck? And all along, both Tanya and the hospital midwives, when they were doing their like Leopold's and checking to see how big they thought he was like 7.5, maybe 8 pounds, maybe, but not bigger than 8. Got to the hospital, he's not bigger than 8. And they when they finally got me open, they almost didn't make the incision big enough to like wrestle him out. Like I was like being shaken on the table because they were like trying to like get him out of me. And then the OB and the midwife, who was her first assistant in the surgery, was like saying that he just like kept coming. Like they was like, and he was enormous. He was 9.5 pounds and 22.5 inches. And he had like a 37 centimeter circumference head, which is like almost the size of John's head. So like, he was just like, he could have possibly been born vaginally, but I would have needed so much pelvic floor physical therapy, just quite so much. So I actually, in hindsight, am kind of happy that he came out the way he did. And yeah, they had to go find, they didn't have, the newborn size diapers in the OR were too small for my baby. So they had to like go fetch larger diapers from elsewhere in the hospital. So that just kind of goes to show that you can be like a super type A medical student and like plan and read all the things and understand. And then your birth is just going to be kind of its own path that you have to navigate. So that's our birth story.
Good job.
Okay, I just unmuted myself. That was amazing. I was amazed at the size of your baby. When I was like, what? And I remember John came in with the baby and was like, he's huge. I was like, oh, okay. And then I like looked at him. I was like, oh my God, like, look at that baby.
And he could hold his head up from birth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like.
And he is still kind of his daddy's son. He's still really big, right?
Huge. He's huge. Yeah. He's applying to college right now. He's just enormous.
Yeah, he's 3 months wearing 9-month clothes, 17 pounds, and like 99th percentile and everything still.
Amazing. So I just wanted to tell you, everybody wants to know why you have so many records behind you.
So I'm a medical student. And John, what do you do for a living?
I'm a DJ. Odd combo, but we make it work.
Awesome. So that is great. And I just want to just say that, like, I don't know if you mentioned it, but basically Ashley's progress, her dilation progress was basically 1 centimeter per day. So she was 5 centimeters when we we were 5, right? When we transferred to the hospital, she just looked at me and said, "We're not going to be doing another night." And I don't think anybody blamed you. And actually, one of the funniest things was that they were all setting up for the tub, and Ashley, it was during the day when you transferred, so you weren't actually having a lot of contractions during the transfer. And the midwife that received us was so excited. She's like, you can just get in the tub. Like, even if you have Pitocin, you can get in the tub. And John was like, "I'm sorry, you don't understand. Right now it's 3:30, and in exactly an hour and 10 minutes, this labor is going to kick in." And she's not going to be doing another night of this. It was very funny. Like, he knew the exact time, like, in between that, that she would be having contractions. So, so that was great. And also in the hospital in New Jersey, where you gave birth, I just wanted to speak to, in case anybody had a question about gentle cesarean, that is something, if you're planning on having a baby with any kind of care provider, a doctor or a midwife in a hospital, or if you're planning a home birth, you can talk with your midwife. It's something that they can do if they have time, which most of the time when people have a cesarean that they did not plan, there is plenty of time. And so what it is, you can talk with your care providers about it, is that instead of having a drape in front of you where you can't see the baby come forth, they put a clear drape in front of the mother. So she's laying down, and I know it sounds a little crazy, like, oh, can't you look down and like see your own guts? But if you're pregnant, you already know that you can't see past your belly anyway. So the incision that they make is at the very, very bottom of your belly. So you can see your baby coming forth just like in a vaginal birth, just like in a natural birth. And that's something that I think certainly Ashley, after all that time, is definitely looking forward to seeing what she got out of all of this.
Yeah, and you reminded me, we still got to do skin to skin in the OR, and that's something that you can ask for. We got delayed cord clamping, which I had mentioned. So yeah, even though it was a cesarean, there were still elements of what we had on our original wish list for the birth.
And the hospital where they stayed has all private rooms that are included. And so that element of family-centered care, which they really wanted from their home birth, they still were able to get in the hospital. And that was really important to them as well. So even though you had a cesarean that I think everybody knows that you needed, it's like you still got to keep a lot of those things that were really important to you for your birth. So I love that part of your story. The name of the question by Leah has a question. Hi, Leah. The question is, what is the name of that New Jersey hospital? Do you want to tell them?
Sure, yeah.
Pascack Valley, right?
Yep.
Yep, Pascack Valley Hospital. It's in Westwood, New Jersey. And the name of the midwifery practice that we transferred to, they do accept planned hospital births, and they do work in conjunction with many of the home birth midwives. I happen to do my training with them, so I know them all very well, but they're called the Childbirth Center. It's a practice of 4 midwives, and the woman who runs the practice is named Lonnie Morris. So some of you may have heard of her. Any of the birth workers might have heard of her. And there are 3 other midwives on her team. She has a physician, collaborating physician team that she works with that practices gentle cesarean and has a low C-section rate and all this kind of stuff. So they are doing a great job over there. And I think, Ashley, I think it was you, but I think that you said, Tanya, thank you for bringing us here.
We were so grateful. Absolutely incredible. And as somebody who's like, you know, rotated in many different hospitals now, and seen a lot of kind of what is in the New York City metro area, I was so thrilled the day after actually every day that we stayed in the hospital, the midwives came in to check on us. And so like the midwife who delivered our baby came in, and like, she didn't come and check on us. She sat on the bed and spent an hour talking with us. I learned about her kids and her birth story, and she heard all about our lives. And it just felt really like very, very personalized care, and like very kind of deep and meaningful care. I was gonna say something else. Oh, the other thing, which is maybe controversial for me to say since I'm a medical student, but one thing that was nice for me was that it's all the physicians who work there. It's like full physicians and nurses, so there aren't residents there. So I didn't feel like anybody was like practicing on me. That can be a concern for some people. You know, speaking to somebody who's like going into medical training, I had a sense that I wanted like very, very experienced people. And so going there was just really nice for that.
Well, I think too, as a medical student, I mean, I think you can smell a student a mile away. So I think like you definitely did not want, you and I have talked extensively about what it's like to learn and how scary it can be, you know? I'm sure that it was reassuring to you. So that what Ashley was just mentioning is that it is not a teaching hospital. So that means that there are no residents or students that will come and learn on you. In New York City, I may be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that every single hospital in New York City is a teaching hospital. So it's not to say that you can't have wonderful students or residents take care of you. And I've certainly been to my share of births with wonderful medical students and wonderful residents and nursing students that were very useful and fantastic. And also not, because people are people and that's the way it goes. So I think for Ashley, it was a very specific concern. So, okay, we have some time. We have quite a bit of time. So I think this would be a great opportunity for people to ask questions. All three of our families are still here, and I know would be very happy to hear from you. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand and I can call on you, because we still have 27 people here. It's fantastic. Or you can unmute and just start talking. Let's see if anyone has a question. No one has any questions? Throw me a bone, guys. I'm looking through to see.
Oh, I see a hand raised.
You do?
Yeah, Sophia Park.
Oh, I can't see you, but you know what? Go for it, Sophia. Wait, hold on. I think I have to. Okay, there you are. Sophia, I think you, for some reason, I'm seeing a video camera on you and I'm not seeing a microphone. Let me see. Oh, there you are. Hi, Sophia. Oh, because you're on your phone. Is that why? Can I call you? I can't hear you, honey. Why don't you want to just text it? Let's see. Maybe she's going to call me right now. Hold on. This is fun. Let's see what happened to her. She's working on it. Okay, she's working on it. Oh, here we go. Sophia, here's her question. What was the Foley thing Sophia was talking about? Sophia, I'm going to let you answer your own question. I'm going to unmute you. Okay, Sophia.
Yeah.
EJ's mom.
Yeah. So a Foley balloon is a device that it's a mechanical way of basically, I think, ripening your cervix. Is that the right way to put it, Tanya?
That's right. So just to give you like a little brief a little brief, I don't know, intro in case you haven't studied too much about induction. You know, there's a lot, I think, that's written about induction out there in natural childbirth literature that we love to learn about normal birth because it's so hard to learn about normal birth. But they actually give some misinformation sometimes about induction. So one of the things that happens is that the person who takes care of you is gonna check your cervical dilation and ripeness and everything to determine how ready you are to be induced. And they give you a score called a Bishop score. So basically, like you get like 1 point for being dilated, and you get like 2 points for the baby being low, and you get like 2 points for your cervix being soft, and 2 points for your cervix being thin, and this kind of stuff. So what they recently recommended, ACOG, which is the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they recently put out a recommendation a couple of years ago on my birthday about safe, it was on my birthday, safe prevention of the primary cesarean. So if you're here listening tonight and you are getting ready to have your first baby, you are only at risk for a primary cesarean. Okay, so the most common reason for cesarean in this country, in case you don't know, is repeat cesarean. So when you look at the total cesarean birth rate numbers, if you have never had a baby, then you are not at risk for a repeat cesarean. So congratulations, that's a risk factor you can take away. So what they recommend now in that safe prevention of the primary cesarean is that the person who is being induced first receive what's called cervical ripening before beginning Pitocin. And cervical ripening can come in the form of 2 different medications, Cervidil or Cytotec, which we're not going to get into right this minute. And another way that it can come is with a Foley balloon, which is what Sophia had. A balloon, basically, it's a urinary catheter, essentially, but they're not using it for that purpose. So they insert it through the cervix, and then they fill up this balloon, you know, which is about this big. I can't see myself, so I don't know if you can see me. Hold on. Yeah, so it's about this big, and it will, you know, cause you to start having contractions a lot of the time. Did you have contractions, Sophia, with your Foley balloon?
Yes, I did. I actually was, I had the Foley balloon placed like at 9 p.m. and I contracted all night long until the morning. And when they finally pulled out the balloon, I had dilated to, I think, what was it, 4 centimeters?
Well, that's what I wanted to tell that, because that's kind of an interesting part of the story, and you know I like to blab. So like the thing about that was that we had that balloon in, and it was not nearly so simple as just having it in. We actually went through a whole process with it where the OBGYN who took over for the first overseeing OBGYN, right? Everybody knows we were with a midwifery practice, but they are backed up by doctors, right? So the second doctor who took over was this amazing human being, bizarre, hilarious, made me laugh out loud over and over. But one of the things she did was she was very sad that we went with the Foley balloon and no cervical ripener. She thought that was stupid. But she also said, I'm going to pretend to be a midwife today, which she said like 3 times, which was awesome. And she started really pulling on.
She would pull on the balloon to like get my cervix to. Because
they like, the thing is, everybody, you know, it's two. I think she explained it's 2 balloons
on each side of the
cervix. There's obviously a little in between bridge place where it goes through the actual opening of the cervix.
Yeah.
And they were very unimpressed with the amount of tension we had on it. So they started pulling on it.
She would just come in every few hours and like tug on it and tape it down to my thigh.
And tape it down. And Sophia was like,
and I was just like, Jesus, are you kidding me?
and people were, you know, like we said, everyone was waiting for the darn Pitocin to kick in, and there was some real nerves going on. But eventually the balloon pops out right at about.
How to birth it.
right about
Yeah.
4 centimeters, 3.5, 4 centimeters. And I ran out of the room and went and told all the doctors sitting around,
And that's
chewing their
that's
cud.
that's when the party started.
Yeah. They were really excited about the birth of the Foley balloon. So the Foley balloon does one kind of nice thing, which is without having an exam, it kind of creates a little milestone in the story, if you have one, because when it comes out, they don't need to examine you. You know where you are, basically. So.
Yeah, usually you're around 3 or 4 centimeters, which I think you were.
Yeah.
Great. And so that means that if they begin Pitocin after the Foley balloon, which, theoretically people sometimes ask, oh, do I have to get Pitocin after the Foley balloon, or will the Foley balloon just put me into labor? My experience, and the doulas that are here can corroborate with me, but my experience is that you almost always get Pitocin either with your Foley balloon or right after your Foley balloon.
So. Negotiation for us, by the way. We wanted to wait on the Pitocin, so they let us kind of do the Foley balloon, and I was so thankful for that. Even though I knew the Pitocin was coming, it still gave me that night to just have my own contractions, which was great.
Yeah, your body worked, and I'm sure it was beneficial.
Yeah.
Well, and also she also got to know, just for her own experience, she got to know the difference between a Pitocin contraction and a natural contraction.
They're different.
Certainly different,
I think too, one thing that should be said here is that, once Sophia had her magnesium sulfate drip, which she got as soon as she arrived at the hospital, they were feeling pretty confident about her still being pregnant. So she wasn't asking for time that was going to send her to a C-section. It definitely, things had kind of calmed down in terms of them feeling like her preeclampsia was under control.
Exactly. That was the only way all of that was possible was because I instantly responded to the magnesium, and it dropped my blood pressure to such a low level that everyone was fine.
And so the doctor at that point said that the midwives could run the show.
Yeah, that was a big thing though. They were not willing to let the midwives run the show until I kind of stabilized. But then
because when you're sick with preeclampsia, those doctors are nearby just in case things get worse quick, which they can with preeclampsia. Hopefully they won't, but of course, they're ready for anything. And at a place like North Central Bronx, that's the line that they walk, because, you're definitely not the first person with preeclampsia they met in there, and they walk that line, which is, intervene when we need to, but hands off if we don't, Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Also a test, also just to say, in case anybody on this blog gets involved, is this a blog? What the fuck is it?
It's a webinar, whatever, yeah.
But in case anybody on here does have some questions about how preeclampsia goes down and stuff, interestingly, there are some tests once you're actually in a real hospital. There are some tests that can determine, I know this sounds weird, and Tanya, you can speak more to this, but there are tests that can almost determine how far the preeclampsia might go. So there's actually they were able to determine by the sort of the various organ tests that they had with Sophia that her preeclampsia was not going to advance past a certain extreme. And that also made them calmer. I don't remember which one that was. That was one of your levels told them that she wasn't destined to have the worst kind of preeclampsia. So that's just another thing. If you guys ever run into it, that will also come up, and it's just various layers of learning what might happen. So.
Thank you. Yeah, those levels are measured in the hospital by a blood test. So, they draw your blood when you get to the hospital. So that's one of those things. And they are trying to determine, is this preeclampsia or does she just have high blood pressure? They are two different things that have some of the same characteristics. So thank you for that. Kate Powell, do you have a question? I'm going to unmute you. Kate, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Actually, now I have two. So one about the preeclampsia. If they put you on a drip of magnesium, does taking magnesium while you're pregnant do anything to help prevent that? Is the first question for preeclampsia. And then there was, I think it was the second couple, but I'm sorry if I'm mixing this up. said something about that early labor or like contractions didn't feel like what they thought they'd feel like. And I'm curious what they felt like.
Oh yeah, and what they thought, right? Okay, well,
Yeah.
I think I can answer the question about magnesium. So I do not know that we think in any way, in any data anywhere, that taking magnesium in pregnancy will prevent preeclampsia. Preeclampsia is caused. It's a placental problem. They have some ideas about what causes it, but they can't figure out how to prevent it. It's a long story, but it has to do with the way that the blood flows through the placenta, and it basically the body can sort of turn on itself. But the main thing is this: the problem is not magnesium sulfate is not a cure for preeclampsia. The reason that they give magnesium sulfate to people who have preeclampsia, one reason is to help to lower their blood pressure, and the other reason is to prevent them from having a seizure. So preeclampsia, if left untreated, can lead to eclampsia, which is like, if you watch Call the Midwife, it comes up. Like in the olden days, it's really bad, and the mom can have a seizure. Seizures are definitely bad for moms, and they're definitely bad for babies. So they can be very, very dangerous. So magnesium sulfate, as much of a bummer it is to receive it in labor, if you do have preeclampsia, it can definitely buy you a whole bunch of time. So that way you can try to have a vaginal birth, which if it's possible for you to have a vaginal birth, it's really terrific, because chances are, even though Sophia is at risk for having preeclampsia in her next birth, statistically, she won't have it. She probably will be healthy, although if she has it, she has it. I mean, statistically, none of us will have it. You know what I'm saying? But in that case, because she's had a previous vaginal birth, we expect her next baby to be very, very straightforward. So it is definitely great if you have the opportunity to go for a vaginal birth. If it's possible and it's healthy for everybody, then it's definitely a good thing to get. So that is a major, as much as, of course, unnecessary interventions are annoying, there are times when obstetrics can help you. So that's one of those cases. And then I will let Gretchen, hold on, I'm gonna unmute you, Gretchen. Gretchen, you wanna talk about what you thought contractions were gonna be like and what they actually were like?
Yeah, well, and I think I was also saying, I thought, well, two things. I think I thought they would be more like period cramps, which is how people describe them, although I don't get really bad period cramps, luckily. So I think I didn't have like this this really bad cramp experience. But I think it just more felt like, I just remember like when they would happen, I would have to stop walking. Like it was just like the whole body sort of like this tightening. But I think the other part that I was saying was like, I thought that was how bad it would be, but I think it was not nearly as intense as how it was in active labor. And so I think what felt like still like pain and like it was stopping me in my tracks and I can't walk, and was why Tanya was like, but you can still talk to me, when I called her and was like, I'm having a contraction. She said, was that just one way you talked to me? And I was like, yes, but it was really painful. And she's like, okay, but you could talk to me. So like, because it gets to a point where it's so bad you can't talk. But I also think the funny thing is, like, so many people have said like, oh, you had an unmedicated birth, like that's so crazy, like you did this for 3 days. But I think they're thinking like, oh, it's as if right now you not in birth at all are like doing something really painful without any of the things that happen physiologically to your mind. But by the time it got like bad enough, like worse than the original cramp, I was like in another zone. So you don't feel it in the same way. So it's like, it's hard to compare, but it's like, yeah, I hope that explains it. But it's also just hard to use words for these sorts of things, with like feeling stuff in your body that you've never felt before. It's hard to like kind of verbalize it.
Yeah, Gretchen, I don't know. I mean, not that this is about my birth story, but I know for me, like, I expected early labor to be the same thing as not being in labor. Like I might miss it, or it might be just so easy that it would just be like kind of nothing. And of course, like everyone does hear those stories where they say, I was in early labor all day and I didn't know it. I thought I just had a stomach ache, you know, and those kinds of stories happen. I was like you, Gretchen. I had a few days and I thought early labor hurt. Not as much as active labor hurt, but it hurt.
Right, we had a woman come to our class and she had like gone to work that day when she told her birth story after early labor, and I was like, oh, okay, like, you know, this is way worse than that. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree. So does that help you, Kate?
Yeah, it does. I'm pregnant with my first, so I'm just kind of like, I guess I'm in that boat of like, I could miss it. So it doesn't really sound like that, but.
Yeah, I mean, some people I think experience early labor in a way that like they're just having some general discomfort, and then boom, they're clearly in active labor and they know, you know. And then other people, you know, their early labor, they clearly know that they are having contractions. You know, it's not as hard as, you know, they can still kind of, like Gretchen was saying, she could still talk to me in full sentences and explain to me what was, you know, I was like, so what'd you eat for dinner? And she's telling me all about it. And I was like, okay, did you just have a contraction? And she's like, yeah. So that's like a big sign of early labor. It's not to say that it's not painful, but you don't have to stop everything to do it. You can still tell a story or tell what you had for dinner. Whereas I'll say this though, for sure, I don't know if you'll have an early labor that you don't register as being labor or not. But once your active labor kicks in, you will definitely know without question. You will not be mistaken. You will know that you are in labor. Out of all, I mean, I have been with so many people in labor, I don't even know, hundreds and hundreds of people, and every single person, nobody missed it. Everybody knew that it was happening. So you will too. And this is going to sound a little woo, but I think for women having their first babies, to just let you know that there's like an innate inner ancestral knowledge that your body has that will let you know it's time. And you'll also be like, and it hurts. Okay, great. Let's see, Leah, I'm going to let you ask your own question to, hold on, I'm going to unmute you if I can. Let me find you. There you are. I'm going to unmute you, Leah, and I'm going to let you ask Sophia your question about Pitocin, okay?
Yes, okay. Well, I don't see her, but maybe she'll come back.
Did she go? Sophia, are you there? She's still there.
Oh.
He is around.
Okay.
Ask the question and we'll get it answered. Let me bring her out.
Okay. My question is how she said that the contractions with Pitocin were markedly different, and I'm just wondering how did it feel different?
He wants to know about the difference between this and this.
It's actually, I would just say that, hold on a second.
She's dealing with the baby.
He's in that phase where he doesn't like me very much, so when I take him, it just makes everything so much worse.
I would just say that...
it's all about the shape.
Yeah, I would say that my contractions were early labor contractions, and they were more flowy, I guess. They were like less jagged in their rhythm. They kind of had like a flow to them, and I felt like I was kind of meeting them. I was able to meet them and kind of have an interaction with them. Whereas the Pitocin contractions, like it felt like it was like talking to a robot. Like they just didn't want to communicate with me, and I kind of just had to be completely just there and ready to respond to them. But it kind of felt like I was like in the army or something, and like a drill sergeant was just like, you know, right now, do this right now. And so it was, it was, I would say that was the main difference. There was less interaction with the Pitocin contractions in terms of like being able to work with them and understanding how to like manage them and ride them. But with the help of the coaching was the thing that made that possible for me. Like it wasn't impossible to do those intense contractions. I did feel like medication would have been helpful. And at one point I was like, why am I doing this? I've had so much intervention up until this point. I should just get an epidural. But I think if my labor hadn't been so fast, I probably would have gotten an epidural, but it was just so quick. It was 7 hours, I think, you know, which was, I mean, not, it wasn't 2 hours, but it was still manageable. And yeah, I hope that answers.
They also look completely different on the readout. Like the actual strips look totally different. Like, you know, the shape is, I mean, it just like morphologically speaking, like the shape is like striking. It's like one has this beautiful line up and it kind of peaks and comes down, and the other one's literally square. I mean, it's like pop, up, down.
It's from a different period of art.
Yeah. That's right. Exactly.
If this is interesting to anybody, because a lot of people have questions about inductions and like, what happens to me if I have to be induced, like, do I just give up, or like, you know, what do I do do I just have a C-section if I need to have an induction, or do I just get an epidural before I feel the first Pitocin contraction, you know? And certainly that is a choice that people can make. One of the things that I have heard said before, just, you know, in the birth world, as people say, you know, well, why would you choose an epidural when you haven't even felt anything yet? At least, you know, see what happens. You know, you're in there. If you need an epidural, they will definitely come and give it to you. So I think probably that might be partially what suckered Sophia into moving forward. But I think that not only did she have a lot of support around her to deal with her Pitocin contractions, also part of the reason that things were going so well for her is because she made terrific progress with those strong contractions, and she knew she was going to push her baby out soon. And so mentally, I think that really helped her as well. Right when she wanted to give up, she was close and it was working. So your Pitocin was like 6 hours that you had it. Is that what you said? Or 7 hours? Something like that?
Pitocin was a little bit longer because, if you recall, we had that weird thing about the Pitocin not actually being administered properly. So we had
right.
Pitocin quite a bit longer than that. But it wasn't actually working for real, except for about maybe 7 hours. Yes, that's right. So.
Yeah, so a 7 hour, you know, active labor into pushing would be a normal time for, you know, for anybody. Of course, it was the Pitocin variety, but it's going to be EJ's bedtime. But but I think what I definitely see, at least among my students who have, you know, they're planning for a natural birth and an unmedicated birth, and they want to go into labor on their own. And if there's a medical reason that things take a turn and they have an induction, this type of scenario where they have like a cervical ripener, like a Foley balloon or Cervidil or even Cytotec, something like that, and that's sort of given a bunch of time to work. Usually they give it 12 to 24 hours, depending on where you're giving birth. And then once that has sort of begun the process, the idea is that ultimately on the other end, you won't need as much Pitocin because the body is ready to receive those contractions once you get them. So, you know, it certainly isn't the same. I mean, it's interesting for me as a home birth midwife. I have a lot of people that come to me for their second babies. And oftentimes they say, yeah, in my first birth, I had an induction and I had Pitocin contractions and they were totally crazy. And so I had an epidural and then I had a vacuum, and I'm really scared of labor this time, but I want to be at home. Right. And then, you know, they feel all weird about why they got their epidural in their Pitocin induction, and they have all these questions. And then we do a home birth for the second baby and they go, oh, wait a minute, I know why I had an epidural. That was so much harder than what we just did here in our house, you know? And so in a way, you know, as crazy as it can sound to just say, I'm just going to do this totally, you know, in a place where there is no pain medication, we're going to have to, you know, get dressed and go get it if we really want it. That many times people find that those labors are just much easier than the way that they experience the pain in the hospital. So I think, Leah, just to answer your question, just in my experience, is that Pitocin contractions are not the same as natural contractions. However, if you make good progress with them, it doesn't mean that it's something that you can't do. And I think that is some messaging that is missing in a lot of the natural childbirth literature. I think probably that messaging is missing because, you know, they don't want people to have unnecessary inductions, which of course is a whole bunch of other risks besides pain that come with Pitocin. So you definitely don't want to mess with it if you don't need it. Yeah, that's what I would say. And one thing just to mention here is that there was nobody in our stories tonight. Maybe next month when we have the next one, we'll include one of those stories. But there was no one here in our stories that had a planned epidural. So planned epidurals and Pitocin typically will go hand in hand, and that's what we call active management of labor, not when we wait around, see how it goes, and if it doesn't go well, we intervene, mainly where we're sort of going into it planning on intervening, planning with an epidural, and then typically Pitocin will be placed on top of that, and that changes the physiology somewhat of labor. So that would be a great, maybe we'll have 3 epidural stories next time and see if we can gather those. Okay, more questions, guys? I don't mind if you're a birth worker, if you have a question, it's okay. Let me see. Well, then I'll ask a question. And I mean, anybody can answer this who would like to. Let's see. Is there, I don't know, is there anything that you wish you could go back and tell your pregnant self before going into your birth? I don't know. Ashley, are you here? I don't know if Ashley's.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, good. I just unmuted you. Yeah.
So that's a great question. When I was 38 weeks pregnant, so all throughout my pregnancy, I had not only had I read basically every birth story that I could find on the internet, not only had I listened to hours of birth stories on podcasts, but I had also, in typical med student fashion, gone out and done like a primary survey. So I like inquired into like the birth stories of like all of our friends and family friends. And I had actually a log where I would like interview them on the phone and like jot down their birth stories and like, okay, what was the lesson from that birth story? Okay, what was the lesson from that birth story? And I had been trying to get in contact with a woman who I used to work with like years and years ago, who I had thought had an unmedicated birth with no interventions. And we had been kind of missing each other. And when I was 38 weeks pregnant, and so therefore like thinking I was going to go into labor any day, and then so I was pregnant for another whole month, I got this email from her saying like, let me tell you a little bit about my Santiago's birth story. And so she told me his birth story, which I think she delivered at a birthing center, and she was planning for a natural birth, and she did have like some low levels of interventions. I think eventually they had to pull him out with a vacuum. And her message to me was, you know, Ashley, like birth is magical, but also life is magical. And whatever happens in the course of the process of birth, at the end of that, you are going to have a little being, and you will have that being for weeks and weeks and months and months and years and years and years. And that is so magical. And so you can focus on the birth, but you can also like, don't let it preoccupy you too much. Let there be room for the unexpected to arise and rise to that. And then go forth and parent your child. And she said it in other sentences, and you know, basically saying like, if you end up getting an epidural, it's okay, and if you end up doing this, it's okay. And I had a vacuum, and it was okay. And I read that email, and I was like, fuck that. I am having my home birth and I am not having any interventions and I don't know what she is smoking, but I prepare and I am not having this. And if I could go back and like very gently encourage my 38-week pregnant self to just like really sit with that email and just say, yeah, okay, whatever this birth shall bring is what this birth shall bring. You know, we were lucky in that we had a great cesarean, but I know people who were not happy with their cesareans, or people who were not happy with their vaginal births, and they had episiotomies and all kinds of things. And then all of us, at the end, kind of, you make peace with the birth that you have, and then you have this like wonderful child, which is like the point of all of it. Because I think in my head, the punchline of pregnancy was birth. And I think that the punchline of pregnancy is your child. And so birth is the part of it, and it's like the gateway, but it's like, it's a gateway, and you walk through it, and you walk through it with your kid and your partners and your doulas and the people around you. But then you get to come out the other side, and let me tell you, the road is long on the other side. We're 3 months into parenting, and the road is so long that we're walking.
That's for sure. Let me tell you, my kids are like 10 and 7, and I'm still like, when am I going to figure this out? Like,
I want to piggyback onto that and just say that, you know, we are in myth making type work. You know, Sophie is in as an actor, and I'm a filmmaker, and we do all sorts of stuff, and we're just very focused usually on really like small, minute threshold experiences, and kind of obsessed with them probably. So in a certain sense, we spent a year obsessed with the threshold of birth, like what you just said, Ashley, which is the idea of crossing over through an experience. And it's just like, it's almost, it's like the same thing you said, but also sort of the inverse. Like, we were prepared for any crazy shit that was going to go down with the birth. We were not prepared for the undescribable, inarticulable thing that happens after birth. Like that is just like, and if there's anything I could have said to both of us, would just be like, you know, the reason why we're obviously obsessed with birth is because it's like the window that we can tell a clear enough story to ourselves about. On the other side of that window, I mean, these 2 months, these 10 weeks I don't even know what to say about them. They're just, it is a shattering experience. It's a completely just identity obliterating moment. And it's so funny because, you know, we just were so focused on this one, you know, multiple hour experience that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's kind of what we know as storytellers. And now we're in like a place that has no story at all. Like, you know, and I mean, I guess there's no way to prepare for that, but at least if I could have said something to us at the time, it would have been like, you know, let your myth making go, check your myth making at the door, because when that baby is out, however it gets out, it's really crazy after that. I mean,
yeah, that's pretty well said, actually. And that's the thing. It's like the story after you have the baby is life. It's your life, and it's a totally new life, and an amazing one, but nonetheless quite different. Gretchen, yeah, challenging for sure, and that doesn't stop, by the way. They just change. Gretchen, do you wanna have the last word on something you wish you could tell your former self?
I mean, yeah, I mean that something along the lines of what the poetry that Alex just said. Yeah, I think I guess if I had more planning to do, like planning for after the birth, which you can't, I mean, you can kind of do and you can't do. And I think we've done so well, but that's been the hardest part. This is the hardest part.
I mean, the first couple of weeks were crazy. There was like nothing to hold on. Like, I feel like we couldn't find anything that was like comforting. We like tried watching TV, but that, like nothing was the same. And yeah, nobody told us about the like hormones when the milk comes in. It was just
I think Tanya told us, but we like didn't.
We
thought it would be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it was just so hard. And like like it was just so hard. Everything that we thought about before like comes up all the time, but there's a baby, so you have to resolve it so quickly. It's so
well, I feel like to show how foolish, quote unquote, we were in the beginning, when we were just like we were only like sleeping 5 minutes in between contractions during this long labor. And then Dora looks at me and is like, once the baby comes, we can sleep for like 2.5 hours at a time between feedings. We're like, it's going to be amazing. And then like after the baby came, we were like, what were we thinking? This is harder. Like, anyway, for the first 2 weeks, I actually think, I mean, it gets easier. But it's still like total mind fuck.
Like you get like I don't know. I also thought, oh, like it's gonna be hard, and then like it's just a phase, and then it goes back to normal. But it goes back to like the new normal that we still have no idea. We're both like not working yet, so we have no idea what like normal, if there's ever gonna be a normal. I feel like it changes every day too. Yeah. He changes every day. One day he loves bouncing. Now he doesn't love bouncing. We don't know what he loves right now.
That's exactly right. That continues and continues. Actually, Doro, that's what you just said about it being a new normal, but we don't even really know if this is the new normal. Like, are we there yet? Like, when does the normal part happen? That is, that's really, really common. And actually, I read somewhere that they say it takes 3 years for you to feel like you actually own your life again.
3 years.
Just in time for your baby to be a 3-year-old, which, in case anybody here doesn't know, 3-year-olds are total jerks. So they are. They're the people. 3-year-olds are the people that before you had kids, you used to judge their moms. You won't anymore. But I know I did. I was like, I will not let my child be 3.
I have one more thing to say.
Yeah.
I would just say that, you know, 2 things just for the people who haven't had them yet, you know. It's, I guess, part of what, if you take what all 3 of us are saying, it is easier to listen to advice and information about birth than it is about parenting, because there is something very finite about what birth is, and when that stuff goes into your ear, like it is able to sit in a way that like anything people told us about parenting, even though people told us a lot, it did not sit in the mind in the same way. However, the last thing I would say is that like probably I guess deep down, all the things you learn about labor, of course, are metaphorically the same things that really is what it is about parenting. I mean, each contraction requires a different coping mechanism, right? And something that seems to work for a little bit of time fails eventually. And whatever you've done to figure out how to cope for this hour, it just decays, and you have to come up with something else. And probably the only way to prepare yourself for parenting maybe is if there's some way in which you can kind of like take those experiences in labor and just imagine them without any end happening forever. Like labor begins and then it doesn't stop for like 18 or 20 years in a certain sense, you know. That's kind of the only thing that I could even come up with to try to justify this madness, you know. So. Well,
Alex, I think that I think it's great to hear that, because I'm thinking maybe our next talk is going to be about the postpartum, about maybe the first 8 weeks with your baby. Because I actually, when everybody registered today, I asked them if there are other topics that they would like to see in a series like this. And many, many people said about life after baby. So I was really glad to hear that, because I know, Alex, you and I have talked about this before. it definitely happened for me too, is that, you know, people tried to tell me, but it is something we just have to see for ourselves. You know, we have to go through it, see for ourselves, and find our own way. And by the way, I mean, I work with new moms all the time. And I just want to say that as new parents, you deserve the space to find your way, and you will. I promise you will. You're going to grow fine humans. So even if you make lots of mistakes and maybe drop them a couple times, they will be great people. So, okay, well, we're at the end here. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to Doro and Gretchen and Ashley and John and Sophia and Alex, and EJ is in bed. They're figuring it out, I'm sure. It is really challenging to do a talk like this at a time like this with a baby your age. I know that if you're a pregnant person or expecting a baby, you don't know this yet, but there's a thing they call the witching hour, and it's right around now for a lot of families. So we really appreciate you coping with the evening time. For pregnant people, evening is the best time because they work all day. They have their normal lives. So if you don't already know what we do at Manhattan Birth, we prepare people for anything and explain their choices to them and help them figure it out. And then so that means we offer childbirth classes, CPR classes, and other preparation classes. And then we also offer support for after you have your baby in the form of in-person new parent support groups. We have one in Manhattan on the Upper West Side and one in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. We also have an online mothering support group called Mother Mentoring. We just are finishing up our beta group on that, and we're having a great time. So that's going to be continuing, and you can watch out for that. You can follow us on Facebook. You can follow me, Tanya Wills, on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram, Manhattan Birth. We're on Twitter too, but not really, because who wants to? No, it's not for birth people. So you can follow us. You can check out our website, manhattanbirth.com. You will be getting a follow-up email. We would love your feedback. If there's any topic, I just got oh yes, do postpartum. I'm thinking lactation, postpartum. There's probably I'm thinking maybe an epidural birth tonight, these kinds of things. If you have any questions or any suggestions, we would love your feedback, and we will try to offer it for you, because we know a lot of people who are new parents and are having babies. Healing postpartum, that is an awesome topic, Ashley. Great idea. Yeah, definitely. Nobody tells you. We could just do one on what nobody tells you about your body after having a baby. Oh, head to toe. Yeah, just that. Wonderful. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording in a minute. You will be hearing from us with a follow-up in the next couple of days. Have a great night, everyone. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions. You can reach us through our website, manhattanbirth.com, or on social media. Have a great night, everyone. Take care. Bye.